Here I go. I'm pushing the button. It's been pushed. All right. So, hi, everybody.
Or are you going to sit in the call?
What's that? All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? We have a couple agenda items today. I think I'd like to start out with the working groups. As you know, today's our bit of a more formal meeting. So I'd love to get some updates as to what's going on with diversity and inclusion, as well as growth, maturity, and decline. So whomever would like to chime in on D&I, fire away. And Georg, I'll take notes because you may chime in on this one.
We can maybe wait. Nicole is gonna join a little later.
All right, well then let's move over to growth, maturity, and decline. How about that?
How about that? So growth, maturity, and decline, we moved our days. We are gonna do a better job promoting the new day for the next meeting. The last meeting had a very small turnout and we didn't decide anything because I didn't think we had enough representation. I do believe we are getting a growing amount of engagement from various community manager types, and we are going to have a lot of new instrumentation to share with people at CHAOSS, including a status page that we reviewed on the last regular non-monthly call. So I encourage people to go back and look at the video. I think was it last week or the week before? Maybe
what is the status page? What is this?
That's the page where we can see a breakdown of which of the metrics are implemented in Augur, and a description of those metrics. And I think our working group is in the process of defining really two dimensions. One is the metadata that needs to be captured with relation to each metric. So commits, for example, can include a number of ways of counting them. Sometimes white space is removed, sometimes it's not. Sometimes squashed commits are accounted for, sometimes they aren't. So to the extent that there are these variations every time a metric is presented, we're trying to describe the families of variations and we're calling that metadata. And then also we're in the process of defining individual metrics with more clarity and grounding them a little bit more in published research about the metrics themselves.
All right, so there was some discussion too about, so right now, the way I understand it is the growth, maturity, and decline work group is working pretty much directly off of the metrics that are listed on the metrics page. So over on the metrics page, there's the list of kind of.
You are breaking up a lot, Matt. I don't know if other people are noticing that.
Individual activity metrics, you guys can direct that list. Is that correct?
You broke.
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
There was silence.
You're breaking up.
I breaking up still? What if I don't have my video? Is that better?
I think so.
Okay. What if I speak slowly into the internet? Will that make things better?
Not as much.
Hold on, I'll do something else. So
you had a question.
My question.
I didn't quite catch it.
Yep. So my question was, the growth, maturity, and decline work group is working pretty much directly off of the list that's on the metrics from the metrics committee. Is that right? You guys aren't really metrics at this point.
We do have we do have a working repository that is not in the main metrics repository, but unlike I think there's two fundamentally different problem spaces here that diversity and inclusion, that group has really started from the ground up and tried to understand what are the potentially useful metrics in that space, because they have not existed for long or been deployed that often. In the case of growth, maturity, and decline, the metrics that are outlined in the main metrics repository have been defined before. People are generally familiar with many of them. So the forked repository, or the version of a growth, maturity, and decline working group repository that we have, is not substantially different than what is currently in the metrics repository. And that is the difference between this working group and diversity and inclusion, I think.
Okay. Yep. That's kind of where I was going with that. Hopefully I'm not breaking up still.
I do have a pull request into the GMD work group to try to align the structure more with the diversity and inclusion work group structure to kind of align our processes a little bit.
All right, cool.
I put that in last week. I missed the meeting last week though because I was in an interview.
So yeah, that's something we would take up in the next meeting then.
Yep.
So when you say that, Kevin, are you talking about like how they present material? Are you talking about how they work? You're muted, Kevin. Kevin, you're muted.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
just to align the structure of the repository so that we're presenting the information in a similar fashion.
Okay. Okay, that'd be good. Cool. And then Sean, there was also some discussion, I think the way that diversity and inclusion is kind of going, and Georg, you can chime in on this, but the way that they're kind of presenting the structures is a bit higher level than the low level metrics. Is that right, Georg? I'm trying to get this all straight. So the D&I group is presenting their work in a particular way and kind of thinking through how they consider their own metrics.
Yes, so what we have done is we inserted one layer in the structure that we already had.
Okay.
And that layer sits above the individual metrics, but below the categories and high-level metrics.
Okay.
Where we outline what are the goals and for a specific metric, or why do we want to look at it, and what are all the different ways of looking at it. And then within that layer, we describe what are the tools, what metrics can they provide, how do we interpret those metrics. It's the handbook approach, it's the recipe approach that we inserted at that level.
Okay. So this is what you're trying to do, Kevin, with the GMD work group, this recipe approach?
Yes, I am adding that structure in as well.
Okay. Because I think that ends up giving you a little bit more latitude for things like commits, Sean, you were alluding to. That you can start thinking through what a commit is at this layer and how you might go about understanding something like a commit.
Yeah, I think that pull request is certainly something that we will consider in the next meeting. Certainly the rhythm of this working group is slightly different than the rhythm of the diversity and inclusion group, and we'll have to sort of as a group determine if the process that D&I wants to align us with is a process that works for this group. And I can't really speak to whether it is or it isn't because I haven't looked at Kevin's pull request yet.
Okay. Okay. Good. So that's helpful. Do you kind of have a sense on what you guys are working on moving forward this month, heading into the Open Source Summit North America?
This month, I think we're working on finalizing the pull requests associated with the metadata that we want to store around these metrics.
Okay.
And getting in a rhythm for defining the metrics clearly. I think there's been a little bit of a chicken egg discussion for the last several meetings around what is the sort of the engineering view of a metric, which is to make sure that we have some precision and clarity and consistency in how the metrics are defined and the descriptions that we use as examples to get there, and the desire of folks to describe how the metrics will be consumed and provide some flexibility on the consumption end. And I think that resolving that through some of the metadata and other discussions is our principal objective before CHAOSScon, so that we go into CHAOSScon with some degree of sort of common ground that the group is working from. I would say that thus far, Jesus and I are providing the cohesion, and we're working to integrate the work of Daniel German and a lot of other really insightful contributors in that flow.
Okay.
And I think it's really kind of a group formation, process formation.
Okay.
And right now.
Okay, cool. Great. So I think the one thing that I kind of ask both the DNI and GMD work groups to think about is, as you have forked the metrics repository to think about the growth, maturity, and decline metrics, I think those metrics are sitting duplicate now inside of the work group. Is that correct? So you forked the repository, right? The metrics.
So what's actually been, there's a little bit of, the way that the working groups are operating right now is, I don't think they've really created forks. I think what they've done is taken the content of the metrics repository and put an initial version of that content into a completely separate repository that then will need to be, I think, manually integrated back into the main metrics repository.
Okay.
It's neither good or bad. It's just not as sort of smooth and following a flow because each of the working groups is operating somewhat independently.
Okay.
Is there a reason we're not just doing this through separate branches in the same Git repository?
I don't know that there is a reason. I think there's one of the reasons I can think of is that each of the working groups has eliminated the content that doesn't apply to them in their working repository. So in the view that I've heard described, they don't have to discuss what it is existing in the other 4 or the other 3 categories. Now, I don't know if that's entirely necessary, but that's the road that the working groups started off on. I for one would find it easier to look at a branch than it would be to do what we're doing right now. But
it seems like the current setup is going to lead to a lot of manual effort that is not going to be enjoyable.
I concur.
Another reason that we have different repositories is visibility. Branch is not as visible to the outside world.
Yeah, that could probably be resolved by indicating that in like the README for the main repository, though. Just say that development for each working group happens on these separate branches.
So, okay. So maybe we won't solve this problem now.
Not today,
No, not today,
fine.
but I think Ben brings up I think you bring up a really good point, Ben. I think maybe the takeaway would be for the working groups just to be very mindful of this so that we don't have a lot of duplicate work occurring across the CHAOSS organization, and so that you can help reduce the manual effort that may come later. Pushing a button is way better than than doing a lot of manual copy and pasting. So anyway, Sean, can you kind of mark that down for the growth, maturity, and decline, like next?
Yep, I have done that.
Okay. And Georg, maybe the same thing for DNI. Maybe you've been thinking about that one. And I guess Kevin too, for growth, maturity, and decline.
Yeah, Daniel is here. Daniel, you set up the initial DNI repository.
Daniel.
So maybe you have some thoughts on that as well.
Well, hello everyone.
Hi, Daniel.
So our initial approach was, as the diversity and inclusion working group was that different from the initial set of metrics that we had in the diversity branch of the metrics. It was quite easy to start from scratch, let's say. And the scratch we had was the OpenStack gender report. So how I saw all of this? Well, my idea was we have a set of goal, question, and metrics that we have in the main repository. And then it happens that we are producing some more in the working group. So the idea is once we feel comfortable about the metrics that we have in the working group, then we start moving things to the main repository. So that's basically the idea that at least I have, and that was my first idea when having this these working groups and the main repository. So this we have not moved any metric to the main repository. Reason for this, because we still don't feel comfortable with the metrics that we have. So we feel comfortable with the goals that we have defined, I would say. And please, Georg, correct me if I'm wrong, and Raymond and others that were around. But I would say that's the status right now. So we have defined a set of goals that we all feel comfortable with. Now we have to work a bit more on the questions and metrics. And then once we have those metrics and questions, the idea is to start moving things to the main repository. So then we have a broader, let's say, discussion with all of the people in the main repository. So basically we can improve things there for sure. And then we can bring back that knowledge to the working group.
So I want to add to that during the last workgroup meeting last week, which I know you couldn't make, Daniel, there was confusion about the goals actually.
Okay.
So this is something the work group has to do, is document the goals better and write down what they are, how they're structured, why we chose these goals, because it's not apparent to everyone. And we had people join from the Open Source Leadership Summit. That was, 2-3 weeks ago. So they had come because they had heard of our work, and there was a little confusion. So we need more work on straightening that out and communicating what we have.
Then I was wrong about my perception that I felt that we had a list of goals. So we need to keep working there. The problem, my main concern, not a problem, is that we can keep discussing about this forever. So I don't know when to have, let's say, releases or to deliver things. And perhaps would be good, well, something that we already tried in some other areas, try to have some releases of metrics. I don't know.
We had talked about this in the past. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can talk about these things forever. You know,
so perhaps having snapshots.
But at some point, having a release might.
I think Ben's.
All right, so Sean.
I think Ben's point about really trying to keep these in the same repository is probably that's practical, and I think a real important thing to think about. And then separate from that, I think the working groups need to probably maintain their own processes to solve the problems that they're trying to solve. In other words, I don't see process alignment necessarily working for at least the 2 exemplar work groups that are currently operating actively. I think they're trying to solve really different problem spaces.
No, I agree. I think maybe the 2 takeaways I would have is that how the working groups represent their relevant metrics, kind of this layered approach that Georg was talking about. I think it would be nice if we could get consistency in that regard, at least structures and how these things are represented. I don't think it's a good idea to have one work group kind of representing things in one way and then a different work group representing things in a different way. However, whatever the processes are that you come to that representation, be my guest. I
agree with you conceptually, and I think, I do agree. And it would be good if maybe there was a little bit of alignment. I think I looked briefly at the pull request that Kevin made while talking here, and I think it looks helpful and against the growth, maturity, and decline working group. And if it's consistent with DNI, then I think I don't see anybody objecting to that.
Okay.
Meeting. I think it's a real helpful pull request. Okay.
And then I think the other thing that would be nice to be consistent between the work groups would be the ways that, maybe if we talk about it as releases, but the ways that the work group information gets back into the main metrics repository. That process. Yeah. I agree that discovering the nuances is a process unique to each work group, but how that information gets represented back or issued back to the main repository, it'd be great if that process was the same. And the reason I think that would be helpful is that if somebody was going to be in several different work groups, or move from a work group to a different work group, it'd be nice if the processes were somewhat similar, at least in that regard.
Yeah, and to Ben's point, it's going to make merging things back into the metrics repository a lot easier if we work in branches of it as opposed to our own separate repositories.
Okay, cool. All right, any other comments kind of on this? This is super helpful. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody. Good.
I have a question. Is the number that just joined Nicole? Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Nicole.
Awesome.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon.
All right, well, let's maybe now that Nicole's on, maybe we can talk about the diversity and inclusion work group. Should be cool. Kind of find out what's going on over there.
Yeah, and as yeah, I was thinking this morning, we're starting to work on, and Danielle, keep me honest here, and Georg, and others, but we're starting to work on the next level. I think Emma worked on one of them, right? In terms of the metric categories, and then boiling those down into what we intend or what we mean by those different categories. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Is I think fairly quickly here we're going to start to each of us, and I think we left our last call actually where we talked about maybe assigning different folks or different folks stepping up to take each one of those on and work through them and put some detail underneath them, and then to come back together and discuss those the details underneath each of the categories.
So what is a what's a category here? What's an example category?
Oh, and maybe I'm using the term incorrectly.
Yeah.
For example, events, and what we want to measure at events, and what we mean by events,
Okay.
leadership, and what we mean by, so I guess the different dimensions. One of them was communication.
Okay.
The communication modes and methods available within a community. And are they conducive to welcoming and inviting and encouraging a diverse range of contributors to participate?
Okay.
We actually, if I'm remembering correctly, we in our last call got into, there seemed to be some overlap between the different categories. So you've got sort of a main category, events, and then you may have some, what I would almost call mid-level, where you've got a little bit of dimension underneath that category, but we really haven't detailed it out too much at this point.
Okay.
And so in our last call, we got into, there's some overlap between these different categories. And Danielle and others, feel free to chime in here, but that's what I'm recalling at least.
Yeah, that is what I recall as well. And we had tabled that conversation because two core contributors, Daniel and Emma, were not on the last call. And so we wanted to discuss what to do and how to resolve this when they're on the call with us.
That's
This
right. Yep.
overlap issue.
Yeah, and I think it's not a major issue because we can use the similar metrics to inform different subcategories within the D&I category. We just have to figure out how to present this so that it is clear and people are not like, why does this metric only belong here, not there?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
sure. I mean,
metrics that were more horizontally more horizontal in nature, where they would actually apply across the different categories. And I wish I could come up with an example right now. One of them, Georg, was one of them sentiment?
Yes. When we looked, I think it was let me go to the repository real quick, and we can probably figure it out. We had within, was it events? No, project places. Within project places, we have actual places like documentation, and then we have a sentiment, which is not a place itself, which is a way to understand places. And we can apply sentiment to all other places as well. And this is where the vertical and horizontal idea comes from.
Right. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. So Georg, the link that you just sent out, project places, this is what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories. Is that what you're calling categories? Communication, contribution, event, governance, leadership, project places, and recognition. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the categories themselves have specific metrics associated with them. Is that correct? Like issue tracker, sentiment. Okay. Okay. So I mean, this structure is this is not a horribly divergent structure from what we have over in the main metrics repository. Is that correct?
Correct. This is still the goal question metric structure.
Okay.
And then when you go one level deeper, so if you click on documentation, for example, this is the new layer that we innovated, that we came up with, where we
and I like this.
This is the recipe that we give to people, where we say, if you want to understand project place or diversity within project places documentation, here's why you might be interested in this. These are the ways to understand it. These are tools and metrics you want to look at and how you interpreted those.
Okay. So Sean, I think this is right at kind of what we were talking about earlier with the growth, maturity, and decline.
Yep, and Kevin's pull request really creates this page that Georg sent us for the growth, maturity, and decline working group. And I think that all participants are likely to view that as helpful. So.
Okay, so so when you talk about commit, you click on commits and okay, cool.
Yeah, our high level categories are maybe above the level of commit. I think we'd call that code contribution, but yes, your point is exactly right.
No, but like you would have commits would be one of the actual metrics. It'd be similar to documentation.
That code contribution is what would be similar to documentation. And then commits would it's a syntactic detail, but commits would be code contributions.
Okay.
We've been structuring things so far anyway.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to go away from E&I. I just had to make that connection.
I think it's helpful to get some of that cross-working group shared understanding going.
Okay. All right, cool. Super helpful. Back squarely on diversity and inclusion. Any other additions as to current work in process right now?
Since we last met, we submitted a proposal, or Emma submitted a proposal to MouseFest. We have a proposal or two at the Open Source Summit Europe that we're waiting on. We are looking forward to the CHAOSS and started working on, and Nicole, you started working on the panel discussion, getting that ready. So that's what we've been up to.
Okay. I have two more questions for D&I. So same thing I asked, like with growth, maturity, and decline. Do you have kind of a set of things you're trying to aim at prior to Open Source Summit North America?
We don't have any agreed upon goals as far as I remember.
Okay. No problem. And then what's going on with the OpenStack gender report? Maybe somebody could chime in on that. I know that.
Oh, yeah.
This would be super cool to get an update.
Yeah. So we're working on the next release of the OpenStack diversity report would be with OpenStack Summit in Berlin.
Okay.
I believe that's November. I'd have to look at that again. But yeah, if any of you are interested in working on that, it would be great to have your input on that.
What would be the
one of the things
people to provide input?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Sean, go ahead.
What mechanism or path would people follow to provide input?
That's great, Danielle. How do you want to work that? I mean, I know up until this point it's been you and I working on that, and then Allison Parker from the foundation, and some others like Victoria Martinez de la Cruz, and when we were, really trying to, and Kendall, also from the foundation, when we had a focus on mentoring and mentorship. We had talked about this next report, and this is just in talk right now. But if any of you have any input and would like to see something in the report, let us know. What we had talked about was taking the top 5 projects where diversity shines brightly, where things are going well, and the equally important, the bottom 5 projects, and I don't know, 5, it just, I don't know how we got to 5, but 3 to 5, what have you, but essentially digging into those communities or sub-communities and trying to figure out, why is it, trying to get beyond the data to determine why it is what we're seeing, right? Why are these the top 5 and these are the bottom 5 kind of thing? So essentially, Matt, what we talked about in terms of pairing qualitative with quantitative research.
Yeah, just to add something else here, in terms of having a process to retrieve feedback, we don't have that process, kind of an official process. So the idea is that we go through either the working group or basically Nicole and others talking about the report and then bringing feedback from the community. So each time we go to the OpenStack Summit, basically we talk to people, we try to retrieve feedback and say, hey, this is what we have. So we try to have the community on board in somehow. And then trying to focus on some specific people that have helped after a while. So as Nicole mentioned, so we have Victoria, Allison, and some others. So they are bringing some really good feedback in terms of the quality of the data that we are producing and the areas that we should be looking at. So this is the process we have right now.
Cool. Kind of a question on the with respect to the report. Are you also publishing ways that other projects could produce a similar report? I think this is one of the kind of the key things we're going to need to think about longer term with the CHAOSS project, maybe at the highest level, is not just thinking through what the metrics are and how to categorize them, but how to assist people in producing this relevant information, and then kind of what Nicole was pointing to, maybe how to start interpreting that data as well.
Yeah, we were discussing about that in the group, how to help third parties to reproduce or produce a new analysis for their communities. The point so far, I would say that we don't have an answer.
Okay.
So we are still guessing if we should go for some templates or some specific software, or just focus on each of the categories, as Nicole mentioned, that the goals that we have defined, and say, okay, if you want to analyze this goal, you have to follow this process. And then you have these templates, for instance. Or if you are following this goal, then you need to run this software, and then you will have the results. But we are still defining that.
Okay.
Unless Georg or Nicole, that you were in the last meeting, maybe you advanced something, but I don't know.
Not necessarily, but I want to ask. I want to make sure I'm understanding the question, and I think it's up till this point we've been using in part what we've been measuring out of the OpenStack diversity research, and using that as a basis for what do we measure, and how can we genericize or make it applicable, repeatable, consistent across communities.
Yeah.
Matt, is your question not the what to measure, but how to go about it? Is it through software? Is it through surveys? Is it through, how do you get that information?
Correct. It's actually, the method. So say OpenStack produces this report and it's read by people in Kubernetes community or Hyperledger, and they're like, this is great. I would love to be able to produce a DNI report for our project as well. But then I think the next questions are going to be, how do I go about doing that? How do I actually generate this data? Not the metrics themselves, as you pointed out, but the actual methods or processes by which to capture and analyze this data and make sense of it.
Yeah, I think it's really been, honestly, it's been organic. We've come this far. We've learned these things. We think we now need to do this, right? But even getting to the quantitative versus qualitative and how do we do that?
Yeah.
I think we haven't figured that piece out yet. Like, how do we go and dive into the top 5 and the bottom 5? We think that would be a valuable exercise. We think we would learn from that, and we think that what we learn could be applied, ideally, would be valuable not just to the OpenStack community, but to across communities.
Yep.
But we don't really know how to go do that yet. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out is, okay, we know we need to go do this. Now, how do we go do that, right?
So, I mean, you have methods by which you're producing the OpenStack report, whether it's through surveys or interviews. I mean, is it possible to just publish those methods in detail as an addendum? Is that not possible?
Oh, yes, just to add. Please go ahead.
Danielle. Oh, I was just going to say that could be a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't, I mean, it's been a while since I read like the previous reports, but isn't some of the methodology included in the report itself? Because I thought there was a section on like methodology. I mean, maybe it needs to be expanded a little further, but.
Sure.
Yeah. So the whole story here is, okay, we are producing this OpenStack gender report, and then CHAOSS, let's say, appeared, and we said maybe it makes sense to have this in the community so other communities can reproduce the analysis.
Yep.
So as Ray mentioned, part of the method is in the document, part of the metrics discussion and definition is in the document. The software is publicly available in my personal repository, but then I moved this to CHAOSS. So then it happened that when we started to work on this, we started to attract people to the working group, and then basically the 4 main areas that we were defining in OpenStack were not enough.
Okay.
So we said, okay, then we need to start a discussion about the goals. And then this is where we are basically. So we are now defining the goals, because it seems that we still have to, we need to have some more iterations, but the discussion is there. So
Okay.
but the initial idea was to have a generic way of producing OpenStack gender report for basically any community.
Okay. So it sounds like you're trying to, with the OpenStack gender report, you said there were 4 items originally, maybe like a year ago. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
the intention is to align that with the working group so that the categories that are in the working group are essentially the categories that are in the report. Did I hear you right?
Well, we have now in the working group more categories than in the report.
Okay. So would there be an intention down the road to get those things parallel with one another, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because in the case of OpenStack community, I would say that we are more driven by the feedback from the community or the important things that might be useful for the community in this specific implementation of the CHAOSS thing.
I see.
But a question here, perhaps for the board, for your next meeting, would be if you think from the board that we need to deliver things, perhaps one of the things that you may foster is to have this kind of deliverables after 6 months or a year, so others can use things, whatever the stage of the different working groups is, but they can use and reuse the things we are producing.
Okay.
That may help to
Yep.
have this done.
Okay.
I think that's why I often describe what we're doing within the D&I work group as an Uber or umbrella set of metric categories. It is that depending on the community in which you sit, there may be some of the metric categories that apply and some that may not apply.
Yep.
But you can take the subset that do apply to your community and use them to measure the D&I within
Yep.
your given community.
Makes sense. So then, oh, go ahead. Or was it just me? So maybe then it would make sense to put the actual methodology within the repository, not within the report. So if the D&I work group has, say, 8 categories, maybe it would make sense for each of the categories to have proposed methods associated with them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then as people pick and choose the categories that they would find most meaningful to their communities, the methods are inherently already in the repository.
That makes sense, so that you then have the what and the how.
Yep, exactly. You were going to say something too?
Yeah, I think this would be a good starting point for our next D&I group meeting, where we can then discuss how we get the method from the OpenStack report into our structure and into our repository, how we can capture that. I think that's a good starting point, and we can not worry about the other subcategories quite yet and just start with what we have here. I think that's a good way to move forward.
Sure, in that case, D&I or the report would actually have 4 of them at least thought out to some degree. So.
Yeah, our idea is, so the work done in the working group is kind of generic, and we try to bring all of the points of view there. And it happens that the OpenStack gender report is just one of those points of view.
Yep.
So having specifically the metrics or the methods or the things that we are using just there, but means this is what we think, this is what it is, and then this is what we do in the repository, and this is probably not the way to proceed. So this is step by step.
What was the problem?
Oh yeah, let's say that I didn't want to at least personally, and this is my opinion, I didn't want to put everything from the OpenStack gender report.
I see.
So there is a difference between the CHAOSS work and the OpenStack gender report work. And I think it doesn't make sense to say the CHAOSS work is the work done at the OpenStack gender report, because there are more people, more things, more point of view.
I get it. Yep. I totally get it. But I think obviously the work that's going on in the OpenStack report is really good work, and any ways that it can inform the DNI work group.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. There is a text or a chat message. When is the next DNI work group meeting? Georg?
Is
Nicole?
Georg, it's tomorrow morning, yes? I was
Yes,
going
it
to
is.
send a reminder out.
Okay. Tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Central on this same channel.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
And one of the things we've done to try to keep it easier for people to keep track of is on the Wednesdays at 11, when the DNI does not meet, that is when the growth, maturity, and decline group is now meeting.
Sorry. So both of those work groups are on a 2-week cycle, right?
Right. So we're just keeping 11. So people need to keep it straight, and they want to at least be flies on the wall for both working groups. They know there's a working group 11 a.m. every Wednesday Central Time.
Okay. So then actually every Tuesday, Wednesday,
Mhm.
there's an 11 a.m. U.S. Central Time meeting every
Yes.
week. Okay. Okay, I can remember that. Thank you. That's
I was trying to make it easier for myself as well. I figure if it's easier for me, then it's easier for everybody.
very helpful. This is really helpful, everybody. Thank you so much for the work group updates and thinking through kind of these process issues. I think it's important that we continue to talk through these. A lot of moving parts in this project. So in the remaining 10 minutes, we have the CHAOSS, for goodness sake, sorry. We have the CHAOSS Con and Open Source Summit North America. So I think we all kind of know what's going on there. The website, the chaoss.community website, is updated with sessions. So I don't know. We'll see y'all there. Is that about it? That good. We do have a board meeting set up, and we have a room set up. Kevin, you have a question?
We will be doing the marketing video as well.
That's right.
Maybe
Marketing video?
ask for some
Yes.
participation.
Very exciting. So we're putting together, I got in touch with University Communications here at UNO, and they're doing a professional video on, they're going to put together a professional video on CHAOSS, like a 2-minute overview of the project. And so some of you might be asked for quotes, or there might be pictures taken. We'll share it out with everybody before we go public, but yeah, we're doing something kind of official.
We talked about getting sponsors for CHAOSScon. Have we made any progress on that?
Yeah, I have to say that I was talking in Vitergia while Manrique is now here, and they are sponsoring with up to $1,000 if needed. I think that with that we can buy food and beverages and something like that. I don't know if there is some other sponsor.
Yeah, we should probably sync up as a team, because we haven't really done that in a while once we selected the talks. So we haven't really talked about things like who's going to be there when we open up registration, who's going to print out the list of people, and I think there are a lot of little logistical details that we haven't really talked about.
Yeah. What do you think if we start a thread and talk by email and maybe have come through the week before the CHAOSScon or something like that?
Yeah, let's do that. Maybe you could start the thread with the details about the sponsorship from Bitergia, and then we can talk about how we're going to spend the money and some of the other details that we need to talk about.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Something that was missing too was Wi-Fi access for people not having it wrong. Sam, do you know something about that?
Talking about for CHAOSScon?
Yeah.
I do have a Wi-Fi strategy worked out, so we should be good to go there.
Okay, great.
Even if you don't have EduRoam, you'll be fine.
Okay, great.
All right, cool.
I actually have a question. Since it's officially a co-located event with the Open Source Summit, do speakers get passes to that?
I don't know. I will put that on my inquiry. You're asking like if you're a speaker at CHAOSScon or at CHAOSScon, does that mean you're a speaker for Open Source Summit North America? Is that kind of the question?
I don't have a pass to Open Source Summit yet, so I'm wondering if I can get one through being a speaker for CHAOSScon.
Okay, I'll send Kate a note on that. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yep, I will.
I'm trying to remember the regional agreement in this, and if I remember, the idea was that CHAOSScon was free. We were going to be included. I'm just reading the message where we're talking about this some months ago. We were going to be included into the registration for OSS, so that CHAOSScon is there, but there is nothing about the speakers. So, but maybe we can ask anyway. So I agree with you, Matt. Let's ask. Yes.
I'll ask. Right, because as Ben points out, it is officially co-located. I mean, it's on the schedule.
Yeah. No, that's right.
And there's probably other speakers that don't have passes yet to Open Source Summit.
Okay, certainly. I'll get an answer to that. All right. Anything else with Open Source Summit North America / CHAOSScon / Vancouver? Should be lovely in August. All right, great.
I did notice we have a CHAOSScon Europe set up, but I don't remember, did I miss that discussion? And there's no date on it yet.
CHAOSScon Europe is co-located with FOSDEM in February.
Okay.
And FOSDEM dates were already announced that they are 2 and 3 of February.
Okay.
So CHAOSScon would be February the 1st.
Okay.
Have we booked the location for that? Because that's usually the limiting factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have booked the location for that.
No.
Not yet. We can try to rely on the same hotel that other years if we find a sponsor for it. And the problem is that finding a space in the university is very, very difficult, and on a Friday is even more difficult because there are classes. So basically, we need to rent space somewhere. And we can rely on the hotel if we have a sponsor. And again, I can talk to Victoria. We can see whether there is some more money for that. If
Yeah,
you know,
the Ibis Hotel works really well because it's relatively close to the beer event, which is also on Friday, which the university is nowhere close to.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could get that same hotel with a sponsorship, that'd be awesome.
What was it done?
It was the Ibis Hotel. It's where we've done DreamWorkCon for years.
It's in downtown Brussels, well communicated with Metro, so it's easy to reach.
Yeah, it's right by De Brucker, plus the Katarina, I think.
Yeah, it's Ibis City Center, the name of the hotel.
All right, cool. All right.
Sorry, I'm going to be pedantic. Who's going to drive actually contacting them and seeing if we can reserve the space, and then maybe we can start another thread about CHAOSScon Europe.
I can do it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right.
I guess that for the whole day, right? For the whole Friday.
Yeah, that's it.
Probably.
Okay. Do you have a mailing list for the organizers of CHAOSScon in Vancouver, or I just drop an email to the mailing list?
There is a list of persons. You can tell me and I can forward or include you in CC with a list of people organizing. Okay. I think there was a message, the mailing list presenting the organizing committee some months ago. But you can forward it to me and I forward it to everybody putting you in CC.
I wonder if it'd be possible to create a separate mailing list for the CHAOSScon organization. Only because having it in threads and individual emails and not having it archived makes it, I think, incredibly difficult for new people to pop in and out of that group.
I can ask.
Oh, thank you, Matt. That'd be fantastic.
Don, another option could be to use the general list that we have now with the tag CHAOSScon or something like that.
And all the mails should be archived, so that I don't think that's an issue.
No, we're using a separate thread and not the mailing list right now for the CHAOSScon organization, which I think is not ideal.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we should either use the main mailing list if people are okay with that. It generates a bunch of sort of back and forth on little logistical things like food and who's going to do registration and a bunch of. It generates a lot of email that I think is not relevant to a lot of people, which is why I would be inclined to do a separate list.
Because the CHAOSScon, if we had a CHAOSScon list, it could obviously just be used over and over and over again for all these events. Into people.
You could call it an events list. In fact,
I'll get it. Don't worry about it. They're usually pretty helpful on setting up new lists.
Okay.
Talking about mailing lists, we were talking about switching to.
It gives me a headache to even think about, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, that thing happened like after I left, but I heard through the grapevine that they put that on hold. But
no, we got a new. I actually got a new email list that's still on Mailman, but it's just a new name. It's called CHAOSS at lists.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think they talked about like changing tools, which didn't.
Yeah, they were going to change
forward.
something, but yeah, I don't think they're doing that anymore. So we do have a new email that is just CHAOSS at lists, and right now all of our conversations occur through the email, which is OSS-health-metrics at lists, which is not the best name, so we have a better name. It gives me a headache to think about moving an email list from one location to another. So, and there's like 100, there's like so many bots in the list that I can't manually go through the current OSS health metrics list and manually move people over. You know what I mean? There's so many Yahoo bots inside of this list that it would just take forever. So,
Matt, they cannot just switch to the name and keep the configuration and everything.
I don't think so.
Okay. Because I thought they could just rename the list and.
Well, they made a new list. I don't think they can rename it.
If they can, the configuration would be the same, and everybody can switch.
All right, I'll see if they can, or at least map the name. Okay. So anyway, that whole thing gives me a headache to think about. So that's why I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's just a matter of everyone having to sign up with a new list again.
I know.
But that's a one-time thing.
I know you're way more positive than I am on this.
I know we will lose people, but if we lose people, who are those people? The ones that who don't pay attention. So
I know. All right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll put that on my to-do list. All right, we're at the top of the hour, folks. In an effort of keeping things on target.
But is a new mailing list already operational?
Technically, it is. I can send it out. Let me talk to Georg about it real fast.
Okay.
Then we'll talk. Then I don't know. Like I said, it gives me a headache. So
we should have a migration strategy before you post that list anywhere.
Yeah, I know. This is it. I'm not just exactly. This is what gives me a headache. I don't really want to think about it. So the point well taken. All right, everybody. It's noon. Thanks for coming in, and it's really good to see everybody.
Good to see
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.